What's happening, everybody? Justin, Bridgewater's finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, fueled as always by the incredible folks at NerdTees, and welcome to the final week of the CFL regular season, week 16 of the 2021 CFL regular season, of course, an abbreviated 14-game season. We know what our playoff matchups are going to be. We still don't know who's going to host that East semifinal. Basically, everything else has been spoken for. This is going to be one of the more unique and interesting weeks of this season because there's going to be so many players not playing. When you think about it, 4 of the 6 playoff teams have absolutely nothing to play for this week. They can't improve or disimprove their playoff positioning. There's really no motivation for them whatsoever to play most of their starters. So you're going to see a lot of backups, a lot of second stringers, people making CFL debuts. It does make it very difficult to predict games. However, speaking of predicting games, the hot streak continues from week 15, 8-4. That's right, 8-4 across all of our CFL picks from week 15, and that included going 3-1, both straight up and against the spread. Sitting a full 12 games now over 500, picking the games straight up 35-23, and have evened up the against the spread record now at 29-29. So this is a watershed week. We got to do well against the spread this week to make sure that we're in the best position possible heading into the playoffs. Totals were even money, so we're still 7 games underwater there, 25-32-1. But overall on the season, 89-84-1 across all the picks. It's 51.15%. And again, think about where we came from in those first 3 weeks. As I said, the playoff picture really, it can't change at all in the West Division. We know the West semifinal is going to be the Calgary Stampeders in Saskatchewan taking on the Roughriders, with the winner of that game then traveling to Winnipeg for the West final. In the East, it is a little more murky. Obviously, we know Toronto's getting the bye directly to the East final. We know Hamilton and Montreal are going to play each other. What has not yet been decided is where that game is going to be. So, if Hamilton wins, it doesn't matter what Montreal does, Hamilton will host that game. If Montreal wins, Hamilton must win in order to host that game. Or if somehow both of these teams tie, Hamilton hosts the game. And of course, if Montreal loses, doesn't matter what Hamilton does, Hamilton will host the East semifinal. The winner of that game then goes to Toronto for the East final. Now, if that's clear as mud for everybody, we'll move on to CFL Fantasy, where I had another solid week in week 15, 82.1 fantasy points on my CFL roster for week 15. Again, I made almost wholesale changes to that roster. Shout out to my guy Ryan Coop at the Canadian Football Fantasy Fix for his input and information as I polished off my roster. So I did wind up having a strong performance, which did help me accomplish my fantasy goal for this season, which was to move inside the top 800 overall. I moved up to 772nd place overall, moving up a single place in the official Atlantic Schooners CFL Fantasy Football League as well to 14th. So my goal was to get inside the top 800. I'm now in there by a couple of points. My stretch goal was to get inside the top 700. So at 772, seems like it's a long way to go, but that was only like 6 points and a little bit. So with a strong performance in week 16, totally doable. My Week 15 fantasy football MVP, definitely Curly Gittens Jr., wide receiver for the Toronto Argos. 7 catches, 72 yards, and found the end zone. I believe it was 20.2 fantasy points, was it? Yeah, 20.2 points for Curly Gittens, a big performance. I had 3 of my roster players with at least 16.5 points apiece, so I had good high-end performances from those relatively inexpensive players. I was able to grab a defense with the changes that I made. So overall, it was just a really solid week for me in fantasy, which is good because week 16 is not off to a great start. We'll show you the week 16 roster right there, and as you can see, AJ Ouellette putting up a big fat 0 points for me, which is baffling. He was listed as the Argos starter, and the guy that was backing him up got all the touches. I mean, Ouellet did not touch the football. Somebody was saying they didn't even see him on the sideline, so maybe he didn't even wind up dressing for this game. You'll also see James Wilder did play. Edmonton's got 2 games this week, obviously the game on Tuesday, as well as the game later in the week. He put up 6.8 points in the start. If he can do that again, that'll get me, 13 and 13 and a half, something like that, which would be at least something from that position. But man, Ouellet putting up that goose egg does absolutely nothing for me. I'm grabbing Nathan Rourke because he's getting the start for the Lions this week. Cheapest quarterback option at $5,000. Stacking him with James Butler at running back as well as Dominique Rhymes at wide receiver. So let's see if the Lions can do something there. Kyan Schaefer-Baker, KSB, is my other wide receiver, and I'm grabbing the Als defense. Originally, I did bite on Edmonton's defense because, of course, they play 2 games. They only gave up 7 points. It probably would have been a smart play, I guess, but just didn't wind up taking it. So grab the Als defense. Let's see what they can do for me. Bright side there is I think the CFL fantasy game goes through the playoffs as well. So even if I lose a little bit of ground this week, I still got a few weeks to make it up. 4 more games on the schedule for week 16. We've got Ottawa in Montreal taking on the Owls, like we mentioned before. Edmonton is in BC to take on the Lions, their second game in, I think, 4 days, which is brutal. We got the Riders in Hamilton taking on the Ticats, a game which may or may not matter, depending on the results of Ottawa-Montreal. And Winnipeg is in Calgary taking on the Stamps. By the way, I'm back out here because the few people that wound up watching the video on the game on Tuesday, the Edmonton-Toronto game, said they liked the background. I asked about it. They said they liked it, so I decided to stick with it for the Week 16 video. And these picks are going to be relatively short because I've said a lot of what I have to say. There was really no sense, to me anyway, in looking at what's happened in the season up to this point, because so many of these games are just going to have backups in them and folks that don't usually start. So trying to do like a statistical analysis of what's likely to happen seems like a bit of a fool's errand. So let's go ahead and start with that first game, which is Ottawa in Montreal. Again, a game that definitely matters for the Alouettes. They have to win this game and hope that Hamilton loses for any shot at hosting the East semifinal. So by that token, Ottawa could play like a weird kind of spoiler if they decided that they want to. They could try to play spoiler for the Owls to ensure that then they don't get a home playoff game. But then by doing that, they give a home playoff game to Hamilton, who is a provincial rival in Ontario. So it's a weird spot for Ottawa to be in terms of like, oh, we get to play spoiler. I guess they could do it if they wanted to. DeLance Turner is not participating in practice. So I have to imagine Timothy Flanders, who is not on the injured list at all, is going to get the start based on the practice reports. You know my feelings on that. I think it's a good move. For the Owls, since this is a game that matters, I expect most of their starters to play, with maybe a couple of notable exceptions. I could see them, if Cameron Artis-Payne is healthy, I could see them sitting William Stanback. I don't think they need William Stanback to play this game in order to win this game, because the game's against Ottawa, and Ottawa are what they are. So I think you can sit Stanback, get him that rest heading into the playoffs. He is your nuclear weapon on offense. You want him as rested and capable as humanly possible, as close to 100% as you can get him. So it would not shock me to see Montreal decide to sit William Stanback this week, get him that rest ahead of the East semifinal. Also of note, Eugene Lewis is not participating in practice, was a DNP yesterday in practice. He may not wind up playing either. Could be a real smash spot for Jake Weinicke backers in fantasy. Once again, it feels like a solid spot for the Owls if they decide they do want to sit William Stanback. They know they've got capable running backs behind him. One way or the other, I like the Alouettes to win this game for sure. They're the ones that need to win this game. Ottawa gains nothing winning or losing it. So I'm going to grab the team that's got motivation, and that's the Alouettes. On the line, however, Montreal's laying 14 points as the home favorite. That's just too many. In a game where they may not have Geno Lewis, they probably have Trevor Harris at quarterback, and they may not have William Stanback because they may voluntarily decide to sit him. 14 points is way too many in this matchup. I think Ottawa covers this number. I don't think it's a smash cover, and I don't think Montreal's at risk of losing this game. But the 14 points is way too many, especially with the way this season has gone in the CFL. You got to take those points. So I'm going to be taking the 14 on Ottawa. Total in the game set at 45 points, and I had kind of made a commitment in my brain that any of these games, before I saw any of the lines, I was like, 45 seems like a watershed mark to me for some reason. So any game that's over 45, I'm probably going to go under on, and any game that's less than 45, I'm probably going to go over on. Of course, this game winds up exactly 45 points. But I'm going to stick on the under because, again, we may see those real dynamic offensive playmakers for the Alouettes not playing in this game. I expect this total to come down before kickoff. So I'm going to grab the under right now. Under 45 points in Montreal. Ottawa, let's go. Als 23, Ottawa 17. Let's go to BC now, where the Lions are going to play host to the Edmonton Elks. Once again, the Elks' second game in 4 days. Very tough spot for them to be in. A meaningless game between the two non-playoff bound West Division teams. And based on that, Michael Riley not playing this week for the BC Lions. Canadian quarterback Nathan Rourke is going to get the start. He's had limited action this year. He's thrown for 395 yards, 2 touchdowns, 3 picks. Again, in limited action. For the Elks, as we saw, James Wilder played okay in his first game in a couple of weeks. Do they run him back out there again for the second time in 4 days where he's just coming off the injured list? Or do we see Walter Fletcher? I would not be shocked one little bit if Walter Fletcher gets the start in this game. He's played really well this year. Like, they have kind of a running back controversy here, unless they want to start operating like 2-back sets, which is something that you really don't see a ton in the CFL. You're starting to see it a bit more like in Toronto, and they had success with guys like John White and DJ Foster, employing Foster more as a wide receiver. Maybe you might start seeing more of that in Edmonton if James Wilder sticks around, but wouldn't be shocked at all to see Walter Fletcher get the start for the Elks. And then again, you got to ask yourself, is Taylor Cornelius going to get the start here where he just played 4 days ago? Do we finally get to see Nick Arbuckle in an Elks jersey? It'll be interesting to see when the depth charts come out for this game. Again, I just think this 72-hour turnaround for the Elks is damn near poisonous to them. Look, both of these teams can play this game to win. It doesn't mean anything for either of them in terms of the playoffs, but I just think the BC Lions are the better football team here, even with Nathan Rourke at quarterback. I'm going to go ahead and take the Lions here at home. Let's take BC in BC place to beat Edmonton. On the line, the Lions are laying 4.5 points as a home favorite, and I'm going to lay the points right along with them. Nathan Rourke can cover this number against a team that has to be exhausted. You'll see some defensive backups. Rourke can cover this number. So we're going to go ahead and lay the 4.5 points on the BC Lions. Total in this game set at 48.5 points. Got to take the under. Don't know who's going to be playing on the offensive side for the Elks. BC not exactly letting the world on fire with their offense, even though they got Lucky Whitehead back. I think Lucky will probably have a good game here in the season finale. Even with that, we got to stick under on that point total. It's just too high, especially for the CFL this season. So we're going to stick under 48.5 points in BC Edmonton. Let's take Lions 27, Elks 16. And I'm going to take this opportunity now, as I always do at this point in the episode, to shout out my great friends and sponsors at Nerd Tees, who are certainly helping me claw my way through the recording of this episode. Nerdtees.ca is where you need to go, especially this time of year, to get dozens and dozens of excellent loose leaf tea blends and tea accessories. Great options for those hard to buy for people on your holiday lists. You want to go to nerdtees.ca and you want to use my promo code, which is BWFinest. With that, you're going to save 15% at checkout. You're going to get free shipping in Canada on any order over $100. You're also going to get a great conversion rate on the US dollar if you're one of my viewers from the United States. Today's blend is Strawberry Power Up, which I also had on my NFL show a couple of days ago. It's just excellent. Again, I've been enjoying Strawberry Power Up for quite some time now, and you can too by going to nerdtees.ca, hitting that promo code BWFinest, save your 15%, get your free shipping, find yourself something to love, or find someone you love something to love. You can do it on nerdtees.ca. All right, let's pick things up here in the second half. We're going to go to Hamilton now. The Ticats playing host to the Saskatchewan Roughriders in an extra division matchup. The Riders have absolutely nothing to play for in this game. Again, they cannot improve or decline their playoff positioning. So I would expect basically a full resting of starters, with the exception of Kyan Schaefer-Baker. We kind of know he's getting a start at wide receiver. I think William Powell has already announced that they're going to sit him, or he's not participating in practice one way or the other. I expect the Riders will be sitting a laundry list of players, especially on the defensive side, to rest them up for their playoff game next week. On Hamilton's side, I think the way Hamilton plays this game is ultimately decided by what happens in the Montreal game. If Montreal somehow loses to Ottawa, Hamilton knows they don't have to play all of their starters, because it doesn't matter whether they win or lose that game. They can rest up all their starters because they know they're going to get that home playoff game. So one way or the other, it's really going to depend on what happens in the Montreal game, how Hamilton plays this. Now, my expectation is that Montreal wins that game, which means Hamilton will have to play all of their starters. So I would expect Hamilton's going to have their full complement of players here. This could potentially be like the worst game of the season if both teams are in a position where they're resting all their starters and it's nothing but backups. Going to look like a preseason game, might end 6-3. This could wind up being one of the worst games of the CFL season, but since I expect Hamilton will have to play their starters, I think it'll wind up being at least a little bit better than that. So we're grabbing Hamilton straight up, but against the spread, Hamilton's laying 5.5 points. This originally started as a Hamilton -1, I think is what this line opened as. So now they're laying 5.5. I think that's too many points. I'm going to hedge my bets here, and it's protection against what might happen in the Montreal game. So I'm going to hedge my bets. I'm actually going to take the Riders plus the 5.5 points. Hamilton has no reason to have to blow the Riders out of the water. Total in the game set at 42. Number's too low. I got to go over on this one. This might be a bit of a sucker play, but that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take the Hamilton Ticats 23, Saskatchewan 20, over the 42 points. And the last game we're going to look at is, again, kind of a game that's in a very similar situation. Calgary and Winnipeg. Again, neither one of these teams have anything to play for. This game taking place in Calgary. Wouldn't be surprised to see Sean McGuire get another start here for the Bombers. He threw 4 interceptions last week, which obviously was not good. But who knows? Again, Winnipeg could give this like the preseason treatment where they have Collaros prepare like he's going to be the starter. Collaros may even get the start in this game, and then they have McGuire go in like in the second quarter or in the second half. The possibility for that certainly exists, just to keep Collaros warm, just to kind of give him the rep and give him the preparation time and give him the repetition. Again, I talked about this last week, so I feel like I'm kind of chewing my food twice here, but you're talking about like Collaros not starting for 3 straight weeks when you consider the bye. That's off-season conversation. That's like rust conversation setting in. You don't want that to happen with a guy that you're going to obviously depend very heavily on to try to win the Grey Cup. So I wouldn't be shocked to see some Collaros in this game, probably just not a lot. For Calgary, nothing to play for. Like Saskatchewan, I expect basically a full resting of the majority of their significant starters. They know what's happening. They know where they're going next week. So I think they're going to obviously take the time to be as prepared as possible. Given that that's the context, this could also wind up being the worst game of the CFL season, because you got 2 teams that obviously are going to be resting the majority of their starters. I'm actually going to take Calgary here. I'm going to take Calgary to upset Winnipeg. I didn't think Winnipeg looked very good last week at all when they were resting most of their starters. Obviously, Sean McGuire threw up a bunch of those picks. If he gets another start, I don't necessarily trust him as a starting quarterback right now. And even if they sit Bo Levi-Mitchell, the Stamps, they've still got Jake Maier back there. And Jake Maier proved earlier this year he can win games in this league against starters. I got Calgary upsetting the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, and it is an upset because the Bombers are laying 4.5 points in this game at home. This feels like a hedge one way or the other. I think you take the points either way, but I like Calgary to win. Assuming it's Jake Maier, he can definitely cover this number, even if it's a losing effort for the Stamps. I like Calgary plus the 4.5. Total in the game set at 41.5, and once again, I'm going to bite on this one. The number's just too low for me. We're going to go over 41.5 points in Calgary, Winnipeg. Let's go Stamps 24, Bombers 21. Competitive game. Calgary gets the job done. There you have it, folks. Those are your picks for the CFL, the final week of the CFL season, week 16. Let's go over them here with you one more time. I've got the Alouettes at home beating the Ottawa REDBLACKS 23-17. Got Ottawa covering plus 14 against the spread. Game stays under 45 points. I got the BC Lions beating the Edmonton Elks in BC by a score of 27-16. I like the Lions to cover minus 4.5 against the spread. Game stays under 48.5 points. I like the Hamilton Ticats to beat the Saskatchewan Roughriders, but I am hedging my bets there and grabbing the Riders plus 5.5 against the spread. Hamilton wins the game 23-20, which means it goes over the 42-point total. And I've got the Calgary Stampeders upsetting the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. That game in Calgary, actually. Calgary plus 4.5 against the spread, obviously where I like them to win outright. Game goes over 41.5 points. Final score, Calgary 24, Winnipeg 21. Regular season in the books at the end of the games this week. Folks, thank you. Obviously. Thank you so much for coming back, supporting this show, supporting the league after the league was off last season because of the pandemic. It means an awful lot to me that there is a group here, that there is a collection here that digs the CFL, wanted the CFL back, got the CFL back, and was very excited about it. Obviously, my CFL crew, they all know who they are. That's it for me. Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, fueled as always by the incredible folks at Nerd Tees. I got to get this episode edited and up and ready before I got to go to work in just a couple of hours. So a bit of a marathon. Let's see if we can't do that. Thank you so much for riding with me all season long. And of course, the ride does not stop here. We still got playoffs to talk about. We got 3 more weeks of CFL action. Obviously, we've turned the records around. Let's just see how far we can drag this thing going forward. Enjoy the games in week 16. We'll see you again for the East and West semifinals. Playoff time, just around the corner.